What I'd like to do is continue with the exercise that we started this morning and invite you into an experience of feeling the different octaves of your consciousness and feeling the felt sense of it, however it shows up for you, and to be with that possibility of the octaves of yourself being in harmony with each other in such a way that you can support and feel the resolution of conditioning. And so this morning before lunch, when we were in silence together with a invitation around the storybook, right? The layers of experience of having stories read to us at some point in time. In that experience, there was that qualitative felt, the substance, the fabric of it, right? That kind of cozy feeling. And so we can come into it in that way, of coming back into that inner, layered, loving storyline, those layers together. And you stepped out for a moment when there was just one more piece of being with the astrology, the planetary storyline as well. So each layer of being has its own stories unfolding, and we're creating ourselves from each higher level down. So the level where you're the cosmos and you are all the planets with your own personalities as planets, having your own relationships as that create different geometries, different influences. There's a whole storyline happening on that level of consciousness. And in your soul projection into this human lifetime, there's a perfection of the moment that's under certain influences of the configurations of all the cosmos. So you're the whole thing. And when we were speaking about the story upon story, the child snuggling in a blanket in the envelopment of love, having a story read to them, and then the mind is engaged in listening so deeply to the story being told that then that story becomes alive. We're no different than that. And the astrology piece or the planetary piece, when you stepped out, was just inviting in energetically another layer of story that our human story then arises out of. And it's important in recognizing these different layers of the size difference. We know when we open into a larger aspect of ourselves, we feel this infiniteness. It's huge. Or when you're having an absolutely fabulous day everything's going in your way. What are words we use? I feel a mile tall or something, or like there are different sayings, or like feeling huge. One has opened to a larger dimensional body of themselves.
Large as life.
Large as life. Yeah. Awesome. Right. Right. So, again, as we begin to navigate who and what we are and start recognizing these different felt senses of our being, it helps us navigate when we feel stuck or lost or small. And again, the whole universe being able to experience itself as small is profoundly beautiful. So when you recognize, oh, I'm feeling small, that's a miracle, actually. So when I speak about these harmonies of these octaves on the inside, there's a recognition of the size difference. This also comes into play when people are feeling, or it can come into play when people are feeling overwhelmed and they feel a grief that is just so unsurmountable, it's too much to process, or whatever or a fear or something. And in our sort of human size, we can navigate as much as we are comfortable navigating. And when we start dipping into larger bodies, the size of the emotion can be the size of the cosmos. And then the small self, when we're relating from that size, we can feel overwhelmed by the bigness of the feeling that's being felt at a larger scale. And so the mind-blowing brilliance of this whole thing is like we're one consciousness, we're the whole thing that has made ourselves into this array of experience. And the evolution or the self-exploration, the self-discovery is happening simultaneously throughout all these layers together. So you as God cannot experience the joys and challenges of your humanness unless humanness exists. And the humanness is not separate from the Godness. And so where I'm speaking about these different layers having different sizes, that experience is true. But what's happening is, I don't know if I can get these words quite right. The humanness, the smallness of the humanness and the largeness of the Godness is not appears to be a paradox. But your human processing of the cosmos size emotion is how God refines itself. So we can feel in our smallness that it's overwhelming to process these large emotions. We can say, like, it feels too much, it's too big, I can't do it, from the smaller self. But because we are the whole thing, you can do it. It does happen. And so this exercise is to support your recognizing these different octaves in their differentiation, to recognize the different frequency, tone, feeling, however you want to describe it, of each of them. But also to support you recognizing where the tesseract thing happens and where God and the human are one. And when you do that in a way that recognizes the octaves, it's less likely that arrogance shows up. Like a massive ego, spiritual being that sits in a chair and says, I am God and this is how we're going to run this satsang, and where the union has happened, but it's happened in a way that's missing something. So there's a profound humility in the realization of being a God. And if one starts to step into that grandiosity in that way, it doesn't feel as clean, right?
Filthy.
Well, it is what it is. It still is the universe exploring itself, right? So there's still beauty in it.
Okay.
But it's not what I'm interested in teaching.
Right.
Right? I'm interested in something else. So, and so this is the another expression of what I was sharing earlier about the core flow being a line, being an axis that has dimensions and planes of existence arising out through the horizontal field that can be experienced in that fullness of time and space and multi-dimensional manifestation, where you can be in yourself in those different resonances and octaves. And at the same time, how that core flow can then also be experienced as a centerless center, that everything arises out of, so it's free from the manifested reality. And so in yourself, you can recognize these different layers and be in the fluidity of them, and also recognize that which we have no words for, that nameless, empty, the truth that we arise out of that we cannot see. So there's been a lot of ground that has been covered this morning, and in just this little bit. And there's no right or wrong experience to have from this next part of our time together. It's more an inner exploration. And I'll be guiding, and my guides will be guiding from the inner planes to support your experience and your self-discovery. it was a number of years ago when I came to Sedona. Things were all still, the awakeness, the newness, this wild reality was still fairly new and opening. And there's a particular place I was called to sit. And when I sat, I recognized I'd never experienced one before, didn't know that it existed. It was totally new. I sat on the spot that was a portal. And resting in that, I saw all these universes and all these layers that I've been speaking about, all laid out in front of me. And I could see from that place you could actually physically travel to any of them. And it was both amazing and terrifying at the same time. And resting in myself, what came forward was the wisdom that I did not know myself well enough. I did not know home well enough here to travel. And so sitting in this portal, then my beingness fell back. And so when I was talking about people can feel like you dive in or are resting in the center or fall back, my experience was falling back into a deeper clarity of I am. And so this time together is in support of your resting back deeply in yourself to know yourself more. To know yourself more. So, are there any questions about what I've said so far? And I'll share more of the exercise or how this will unfold in a moment. But so far, is there any particular thing that's sort of nagging?
From the various ways you express the totality, the godness, and my experiences as each of the individuated beings experiencing, which is also divinity, then my question is, does that godness consciousness experience itself as God consciousness itself, or only through the experiences of the individuated beings?
You, as Nancy, opening to this experience, because this is the lens you're going to be experiencing from and through, can experience both. You can experience different octaves and experience your higher self as a separate being. Like when people say, I'm communicating with my higher self, which sounds like they're communicating with another. That's what's happening. There's a relationship that can happen. And where the higher self or that light body or the soul body can then guide the human experience through a sense of a relationship of two. When it is actually one thread of self-knowing from source through an individuated axis with the different dimensional bodies right around that axis. So you can experience it that way. You can also open to experiencing from your God self and feel that in the totality and see your humanness arising out of that. You can also experience them superimposed, where there's a recognition of them being inseparable.
Separate but inseparable.
Like a harmony. Like if you think of a C note and an E note,
Okay.
and you play them together, you're hearing one note. But it has, or a C note and another C note, like that. So it's like music, looking at it as sound, is another way to kind of describe what we are. So when you have a harmony playing a C, E, G, and another C, and they're all playing, the C note can still recognize itself as a C in its own consciousness, even though it's being heard in a harmony and something is created in that. So you are like, when I'm speaking about these octaves, that's what you are. We are all these harmonies of notes all singing at the same time. And we're bringing our awareness in through these layers to start to recognize them and support our experience as we then dissolve the conditioning that's ready to be dissolved in our human experience and on the soul level in our karma. We're just at a phase in terms of the larger storyline, the larger game board that's at play, where humanity is waking. So in a larger game board, that's the storyline. And then as human beings in it, we get to experience that. So one can look at it, the whole thing is a game of perception. It's a game of glasses. Which lens? Human lens, soul lens, God self lens, God lens, tree lens, earth lens, atom lens.
So there is a God lens.
Yeah, they're all lenses, and then there's God is arising out of something too. Like it just doesn't make sense that it would end. It's just the mystery, it just keeps unfolding itself. And so as long as we understand, we're just swapping glasses. Home is the resting place that we know is true, which can see out of any of those glasses. And there's value in resting in a particular lens, because that's home for that place. Right? So when you get in your car, you know how to drive to your house and you know how to open a refrigerator. Or you know how to do whatever. Right? So that relative homeness of that vehicle is essential for function, which is true on all the different levels.
So when as a lens, perception, whatever, one experiences oneness and feels ecstasy or bliss, is that the experience of godness, or is that, and I may be trying to separate things out that don't.
So correct me if I'm wrong. What I'm thinking your mind is trying to understand or bridge the gap between this idea of God being separate than you, or this sense of being separate from that, and wanting to know the wholeness or the oneness of that. Is that as?
No,
Okay.
it's like asking the experiences like I have had of that oneness, of bliss, of no boundaries. Is that the experience of the individuated being experiencing, or is it flipping into the experience of godness?
I would say both. Like this, the whole living paradox. But when we start to embody it, then the understanding, it's again another paradox. The understanding and the mystery that will never be understood are simultaneous, and there's a comfortable resting place there. It's like on the edge of knowing and unknowing at the same time. On the edge of, or in the fullness of being human at the same time as being otherworldly. At the same time as when then they collapse into themselves, and the experience of all of that is a simultaneous moment. So I would say let's go ahead with our experiment, and because it's trickier to try and make sense of it from past experiences. Like it makes sense, we catalog them to gather information to get a bigger picture, right? So you look at a table one way and another way and another way, and then you start to really fill out what is a table. So we have all these different experiences because we're just oneness trying to see ourselves from every angle, because it's pretty cool. Right? There's this amazingness happening. So it makes sense that the mind wants to categorize and understand. That's part of the beauty of it, part of the function. But in this moment, having an experience, a direct experience that we can speak about, that then I could look at that moment in time with you to say, oh, this is what was happening in that moment, to help sort it out, can be more useful to be specific to the moment, as opposed to taking these other things that are in the process of being categorized to fill out the larger picture. Are my words making sense? Sort of. Okay.
I don't want mind to be in charge.
Well, it's not anyway.
But,
So.
I mean, I don't want mind to keep thinking that it's in charge. I surrender that fairly often. But I'm just wondering about the experiences I have had. And maybe I'm nitpicking. Maybe it's the oneness and the separateness and the inseparable that is the mystery. I don't know.
Well, now I've lost your question.
Yeah, never mind. We'll go from there.
Do you want to try one more time to try and if there's a specific question, then I would invite you to try to articulate that specific question. In which case you can have this back. So see if you can be really precise in the question.
My experiences so far of going into this bliss and sense of oneness have been very distinct and fleeting, like flashing lights, like all or nothing kind of thing. And I'm wondering if that is that oneness experience, however fleeting, is the godness, the totality, the divinity. And is that then the way that divinity experiences?
So what I would love to do is bring you, just pointing back to your direct experience. And that the more direct experience you have, the more that question will be answered from the inside. which is the only way that question actually really can be answered in a satisfying way. Because there are so many different glasses, so many different angles of view, that if I speak to one, it's only just one piece. Whereas your direct experience can take off the glasses. So the answer to that, the potency of the answer to that is within you. And in this next exercise, this is part of what we're opening to all these different layers of ourself. And if you can, some little magazine advertisement just popped in through my mind of inquiring minds want to know. Like this place for the mind is like, ooh, it wants to know. And that part of delightful curiosity and interest, that can just be there without having the answer fed to it. Right? That part can just like, ooh, I want to know, I want to know, I want to know. Okay, great. We can just set that aside, and then we'll drop into an experience together and see what happens.
Okay.
Because the direct experience will answer that far better than my words could do.
Well, maybe I'll have better articulation too.
No, I think your articulation was good. I mean, maybe something will come out that feels better to you, but I feel like I understand your question, and I can't answer it in a way that has a fullness because of all the angles that can be spoken to and perceived from. And what matters the most is your direct experience.
The way God experiences is through all the individuated beings who are God as well.
Yes. But the individuals get to experience too, getting to feel like they're separate, having their own adventure.
Right.
Well, let's do the exercise, and we'll see if a more satisfying answer comes in your own experience. Anyone else?
I have a question about, I guess it's about motivation or thirst or direction. When you said that when you were in college, so probably in your 20s, if you have someone that bothers you, you used to sit by the side. Well, this is not something that people do.
Well, that's why I said I realized that I wasn't normal.
Okay, so can you talk about more of that? I mean, where did it come from? Because I don't see people are at that age reject everything and they don't want a problem. You had already some kind of consciousness there that is completely different from what most people exhibit at that age. If you did that in the way you described it. See what I'm saying?
Yeah. What I'd like to do is keep focusing on bringing us into this exercise.
Oh, okay.
And so, this lifetime was about me doing what I was doing. So there were certain things I had access to already. One of which was a odd behavior of sitting next to people that bugged me consciously. So.
But okay. It's not an odd behavior. It's a very mature behavior.
The nothing or whatever is behind the emptiness that's behind it all. Just wondering if you can, excuse me, say something about it to help us as we navigate. Because I am thinking, I don't know if my thinking is right at all. I am confused. That space wouldn't have a lens.
Correct.
And so is there, so I guess when you're in it, you don't know you're in it.
That's right. And I would say, I would correct myself in that it doesn't have a lens, but it also is of a lens that's your sense of self has not woken up to. Because everything was within something larger that has a perceptual lens, as far as I can tell.
Can you say that again?
So, if you use the cells of your liver, one cell is waking up and it has to surrender. It knows it's a liver because it's not making itself as a spleen. It's making itself as a liver. And so, in its dissolving through its membrane to wake up to being a liver, it has to let go of how it sees itself. All of that is happening within a body, a larger consciousness. So the larger consciousness can see, oh, that sweet little cell is waking up to the fact that it's a liver. How beautiful. All within me. So the cell's experience of waking up to the liver when it goes through that eye of the needle between its cell awareness and the liver awareness, it lets go of its ability to see into nothingness or cessation or not knowing, and does not have an experience of a perceptual lens and can feel like it's dying or annihilation. When it pops out on the other side of that needle, and if it opens up to being a liver, then it recognizes, oh, I'm a liver. And it is. It's a cell within a liver. The liver does not exist without the cells all making themselves as a liver.
So there's a new experience because it's gone through this, or because nothingness has happened. But there's not an awareness of nothingness when it's... Do you know what I'm trying to...
Yes. Yes. And there is some larger lens that is aware of that nothingness. But as we awaken through these layers, we don't get to see it. We get to experience the surrendering, the cessation, the non-existence, and then the reappearing.
So when you reappear, would you know, oh, I was gone?
I have.
And would you have a sense whether it was 10 seconds or 10 minutes or 2 hours? Because how would you, if you didn't have a watch, like, do you know? I mean,
Right.
I'm just trying to get the
know.
flavor of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's different for different people, and different moments in time. Mm-hmm. It can be a flash or it can be sustained.
But would you have an awareness of what it was when you reappear, knowing yourself as the liver, not the atom? Or as the soul, not the... Do you know what I mean?
Yes, but because time and space are made up, it can be a 1 second on the clock that's actually experienced very differently.
Right.
Or it can be 5 hours on the clock that was experienced as a nanosecond.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You're welcome. So the cell that's its own individual cell, it's not going to exist without your whole liver. In your body, it's not going to hop out and start walking around the counter. So the individual cell exists within the liver. They're not separate from each other. They can't exist without each other. And then when it wakes up to the liver, oh my gosh, I'm a liver. And then at some point, maybe that liver starts getting the itch. And it surrenders and wakes up to a beautiful function within a form, which doesn't exist without the liver or the cell. And so it's one organism. This is what I was trying to say earlier about the God self with all these layers in the humanness and the processing the emotions of a human being feeling like you're overwhelmed by the size of an emotion because it's so big. It's the same thing. Your humanness and the Godness is one organism. The same way the cell and the liver and the body. And they each process in a different way. They each have a different function, a different perceptual field, a different experience. The liver hangs out in your body as one liver. You got one liver. It's good. Hangs out with a spleen, hangs out with a heart. The cells of your liver, they all hang out in community. They all hang out in liver community. Right? And they get to meet oxygen that comes in. Right? Where your lungs, right, they take that in. So you can start to see you're an organism with all these different parts. So your mind, your emotions, your body, your will, your consciousness, your sense of motivation, your desire, your curiosity, your interest of being called home. Right? It's like the tissues and the fascia and gravity all being this play of this organism. All this is all this play of this organism. And so your God self is not separate from your humanness and can't have each other, can't have the experience without each other, which is where the humility comes from. Because as a human, you can get bumped and bruised and crushed and sing and dance and whirl about. So then these octaves start collapsing in on themselves and you start to then see and live that organicness of the whole thing together. And yet the layers still maintain their differentiation. Your cells, you want your cells in your liver to remember their job. You want them to remember their form and their permeable membranes. And you want them to remember they're part of a liver. And to stay within the liver and do their growing within the liver. We want that. That's good.
There's a word for that. Colons.
Hold on, I was
Part
thinking.
holes.
Holons?
Part holes. Everything is a part, distinct in itself, but part of a whole, larger whole.
Beautiful. Is that part of an integral or Nassim's?
Integral theory.
Because Nassim has, I'm sure he has language for that too. I think Nassim, brilliant physicist. So, because he'll see that also of the, or he'll call them holograms, like everything's holographic.
That's what I'm thinking. Hold on.
Anyhow,
Well, it's the same concept, and I don't know his language for it. But I just didn't know where it was coming from your sharing. And so all of this is available to then be in the different layers, be in the frequency of these different layers, and that each more inclusive frequency and realm or aspect of being guides the layers that arise out of it. So the more that you open to these larger aspects, there's more joy, more bliss, more ecstasy, and there's more guidance and informing of the smaller layers for navigating. And we can just take it down really, really practically speaking in terms of this life and opening up through these layers when you have an impulse of like, oh, stay where you are. And then 10 minutes later, someone shows up who you needed to see and you have a conversation. You know, in these simple moments of guidance, of orienting yourself within the playing field, orienting yourself within this game board. Or which college to go to, which retreat to go to. So the more we open to these larger aspects of ourselves, it's easier to then be in the guiding flows that are there, that are available. So not only does it feel good, and it's fun, it's practical. Very useful.
Advantageous.
Huh?
And advantageous.
Yeah. Yeah, things turn out better. I mean, everything being equal, and yet, and learning happening with all possibilities, and yet, this comes back to a larger piece that I'll probably speak more about later, which is about manifesting and creating a life. And that when we start to recognize the power that's there, we can choose and create our life differently. An obvious one that most everyone has probably experienced is a moment where, and maybe you didn't realize what a powerful moment it was, when you were perhaps angry at someone and you felt the rising up of anger and you were about to say something with that quality and you stopped yourself and you didn't. That's a moment of changing reality, creating reality. Had that come out, and then the response and the unfolding from that could have been a large thing or a small thing. And so when we start to recognize that and recognize our tendencies of our conditioning, and our mind is quiet enough that we recognize them before they react, that's the choice point of reality creation. And so then we can choose less pain. We can choose less suffering. We can create more harmony and more beauty and more bounty for ourselves and for everyone. Which is also why I'm so inspired by this work, is from another storyline, like one of these storylines, right? There's like a giddy, childlike joy of just like wanting to remind people, like, remember? Do you remember what we are? Let's play.
When you were saying you can choose, to Miles, my experience is, I mean, I guess there's an aspect of choice, but my experience is more that if I am centered, that good things happen, that trouble is avoided, that So this, I'm not really. I'm choosing to stay. It's not centered either, but it's like. It really is loving. Is really what it is. That the choice of being in that place. It doesn't wash everything away, but it whatever is there is eased. So it's, I mean, but I can't. But it's not something that I can will, or. I mean, there when you say humble or humility. It's hard to say. I can't make it happen. There is, at the same time, there is that total, well, I know you say surrender, but it's total acceptance of, okay, yes, it's that, and good things happen. That was all. It's not a choice thing so much as a.
Yeah, and this is another, again, the gorgeousness within oneness creating itself in this way, and that my understanding of what you're speaking about is where that identity is resting in that harmony of all those octaves where there isn't choosing. There's not a choosing that's happening, there's not a deciding, there's a resting where that natural harmony is then producing life happening.
Right, it's
and
manifesting.
Lubricates and adds grace and everything into whatever is happening in that moment, and there's no choosing happening.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Could you say,
Yeah.
could you say the larger holon is deciding for the smaller holons? And so in some sense, they have no choice. But if they accept, in his sense, that their position within that larger holon and go with it, then things go smoothly. So the liver, as a whole, is deciding the benefit, what's going to happen with the liver. And the individual cells can die, rebel, do whatever they want to do, but they're much better off if they accept their liverness and work with that. Whereas the body is deciding a lot of things for the liver.
Let me be quiet for a moment to respond to that. There are so many different pieces of consciousness at play. Mm-hmm. When you go out, you get to be with the current of the wind, the food that you ate, where the food was grown, the energy of the person who picked the food, whether the food was cooked over fire or gas or microwave. There's like so many different components at play. And what's coming forward for me in this moment is the joy of the roll of the dice. Mm-hmm. And that it feels like it's another paradox where you're born under a particular influence of probabilities, of the astrology you were born within. And then there are probabilities within those. And that yes, there is a guidance, but that part of the joy of this particular aspect of the universe that we are cells within, there is a free will rolling the dice component that has been added in. Okay. And yes, when we align with the highest frequency possible, things flow better. But just as Richard said, it doesn't mean all things go smoothly, which I think is really important to say, because people can come up with these ideas that if I'm in the highest aligned frequency, I won't get cancer, no one in my family will die, I won't die. I mean, whatever, like these ideas of what that looks like.
I
And
have a question on that at some point, but I don't want to start into my
yeah,
question before they have a chance.
yeah, and one of the things that I am aware of that happens in healing sessions, I'm working at a different level now, but this was, or attention is focusing at something else right now. But what I'm about to speak to is now inclusive within what I'm doing now. But so there was a time when I was seeing people's astrology and the probability and seeing where they were within those probability fields and helping to shift what was necessary to align someone with what their highest probability choice is for this life. So there's still the free will rolling the dice within that, and a support of the easiest, quickest path. So, yes and. Yeah. Is your other question relatively quick?
I don't know. It depends on how much you intend to say about it. So,
Well, let's see if it relates to our exercise, because so far things we're sharing do relate.
it does relate to the exercise. It was actually, it came out of this morning's exercise.
Okay.
I've been meditating a lot on the question of suffering in life. And a couple of nights ago, I came to this place where I saw that it was absolutely inextricably intrinsic to being human, that there was no way not to have suffering. Well, this is the way I saw it, in the sense that how can I know I have endurance unless I have something to endure? How can I, that it has to be there, that suffering has to be there. You cannot rip it out and say there is no suffering. So this morning, when we were doing the different layers, in the first layer I saw, and then your idea of the prick and the love coming together, and then I saw that the suffering and the love were utterly dependent upon one another. So I could feel that in my heart as me, and then as the observer of me, the higher self felt it as well. Then the next one was like nothingness. And at that point, I couldn't see anything. I mean, does it continue? It's just I'm not, if I'm in a state of nothingness, I can't see pain, suffering, heart, love, anything. And then we got into the light and I got really lost, so. I don't know, but it's just that I don't have the step back to see it in the nothingness.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So we rest in the nothingness.
Yeah.
And then maybe in this lifetime, maybe not, then the perceptual body that can perceive from that place comes into clarity.
Okay.
Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And I used to refer to nothingness as a location because I didn't know. And then as the process just continued opening and opening, I started to recognize it the way I'm speaking about it now, which in another 10 years I may speak about it differently again. But so far, there always seems to be a larger body.
That's the way the nothingness feels like a point and also a space.
In when you're resting in that void nothingness, there's another possibility with that where the perceiver is also gone,
Yeah. Okay.
which is what Monica was speaking about earlier. Your question now feels like it wants to happen.
I'm not totally certain, but I feel like I often approach that point of nothingness. And as I'm approaching it, I feel, like you say, the feeling of passing out, that I'm falling back, things are getting fuzzy and gray around the edges, and I'm kind of getting sucked backwards. And then I'm actually not sure whether sometimes a little bit of fear kicks in and I stop myself, or whether I fall back through because I kind of lose it there. My question is there some advice? Can we, I know you're not big on intention setting, but a way to hold steady through that process? Like, I feel like I'm not stable through that process. I feel it happening, but I feel sometimes some fear comes up and I feel like I get kind of bumped back, like I don't make it through the eye of the needle.
Yeah.
Is that possible? Does
Yeah,
that
yeah,
make
that's
sense?
what it feels like, and that also in that fear, then your system gets a little scattered, like the energy kind of like boop bumps out.
And
Yeah,
I'm like, I don't know where I am now, and I
Right.
can't even get back to that nice spot that I
right.
was falling through.
And it's partly a defense mechanism, and then also just a response of like, no, I'm not ready to be that focused. So
Yeah,
when
holding the focus.
you talk about, yeah, is there a way to be steady through it? Yes, and it's with your focus.
So it's just practice then.
Well, you can focus just fine. Someone shows up, it's their birthday, there's a cake coming in, it looks good, you can focus. You can stay steady with that. You know how to focus.
So what am I
So what
focusing on?
so
I
it's
guess?
it's the willingness.
Okay.
The willing, it's not just the willingness, because it's the willingness with what matters most to you. Because it's the emotional reality that usually gets in the way, not the belief.
So I think the willingness needs to override the fear, I guess.
And I often, in the beginning number of years, I often use the words fierce willingness,
Right.
because that's what it took for me. And then in the sharing of like my, meeting the edge of the doors of
Right, 'cause
God.
I feel like, shit, I blew another chance, when it happens.
Right, but there's infinite moments to, like, it's just what's happening, it's all that's ever happening is consciousness is appearing and disappearing back into itself in all realms, it's just all that's ever happening. So, so you didn't miss the boat. But the focus is holding the focus. So the image that's coming now, did you ever do any like crazy water rides at some water park or something where there's like a tunnel and the water's like whoosh, and you go in and you don't know where you're going and you go, I'm gonna go, ah! And you dive in? So do that. Right? There's fear. Okay. Like, let yourself fall back. When you go in one of those tunnels, you close your eyes, you shut all this, you shut everything, you close things down. Okay, you're going to do it. Mm-hmm. So, you don't know where you're going to end up. You let go into the unknown and you go for the ride. It's not that different.
Okay, I'll see if I can figure that out.
When we hear the big splash over in the couch, we'll know. Yeah.
This kind of relates to what Anne was saying. During the break, there was a kind of release or dropping through something, but it happened very innocently. I was outside when we took the little pee break, and I love just the naturalness of the way you speak. It's not academic, it's not stiff, it's not, strict into it. It doesn't have that. And so that, I think, was what kind of just seeped in very naturally and gently. And I was outside and, I'd seen this before, but somehow it dropped in much deeper. It was like, well, of course. I've always known the spaciousness at the center, of course. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but it created a whoosh in the central column. Because suddenly a belief, and I experience beliefs as energetic structures, and when the belief is released on some level, you can it's like pulling the cork out, and suddenly the stream flows instantly. And in my own practice, it's been developing naturally, probably maybe the last year. I'm kind of focused of, it's like we know we're the stillness, right? But I sometimes experience, I have to put this down just for 1 second to make a gesture, but sometimes when I'm meditating, there's a sense that there are two things, and those two things, maybe a little bit like she was describing, like those two things are actually starting to come exactly centered. And how I experience those two things are that, like, the spaciousness, just total spacious, nothing, no objects, no anchors, no points. And how I sit in myself. Yeah, it's almost like the resistance to embodying and knowing myself as the spaciousness, it dropped out. And that created the whole, it was like suddenly slipping into an anti-gravity realm where like you just go boop and it goes for like across the universe in a split second, right? Or even when you mention the light body. And that's not something I really play with or work with particularly, but I did for a moment. And that's how the gravity thing came in. I was like, oh yeah, the realm of light, like that's why we say the speed of light, because there's very little, as close as we know, little resistance in the way, right? And so all these different ways of thinking about it and holding it and experiencing it, and more importantly, embodying it. And a friend of mine does this kind of form of chiropractic. It's called emergence care, and it's based on residing in presence and basically just surrendering the body, the mind, everything. And the body becomes a channel, and it's working in the energetic field of the body, and you're just guided. And I mean, that's modality has saved my life so many times, because it was the only thing that could get into that realm that I had discovered to release these invisible tensions. And yeah, so that was awesome. And I did actually feel like, wow, there's some guides, there's like some kind of assistance going on, because I could feel it. I'm like, yeah, I could feel myself kind of just slipping into little spaces that I might not normally get into, just being in this field. And so anyway, I wanted to add in, like, because people were asking for hints, and for me, it's just embodying absolute stillness. Like, that's kind of how I relate to that 0 point nothingness. It's that I actually, some part of me, that's that Shiva consciousness, right? Some part of me is that absolute stillness, and to actually begin to feel like I also live as that. I'm not just identifying.
Yes, we all have, right, that when I was saying earlier of all that magnificence, when everything's in harmony, we're resting here in that, in our beingness, in that stillness, and in the wholeness, and in the harmony. And it's beautiful that you have a practice, right, in speaking about that stillness and the embodiment. that puts you in that truth. It's great.
This just runs. It's like,
It seems like I have different things to, like on the inner, to focus on. And at times I'm not sure which one to, like, to be in the, just to be in the moment. But I'm also flooded with like light and sound. And I find that if I follow that, and I can follow it quite far, the light, just to go into the light, and that if I spend too much time in that, I can be spacey when I come out of that, almost, it's not, it doesn't seem to be really grounded. So, just to be in the who am I, but, there's all these different modalities that I could go, and I've come to a point where I'm kind of almost confused of which way to go.
Yeah. So, and this is one of the reasons that I've been speaking about things the way that I have, is because all of this manifestation is what we are. And from a perceptual field, you can go out and have all sorts of incredible experiences, which is part of the point. But in terms of awakening, we're wanting to know home in through that inner pathway to source. And opening in through the light. Like there's a way one can rest where you are, travel out in through the light, sort of lose sense of home base, go out in more exquisite and exquisite lightness, and then it's just kind of like, wait, where's my body? Where did I go? Which is different than opening up in through yourself as the light. So what it's an interesting difference, right? When it's coming at it from home base, then it's not a distraction. It doesn't throw one off. It doesn't. And I'm not saying that you doing your exercises is a distraction or throwing you off. I'm just remembering bits of teachings I heard from other people were always sort of poo-pooing these experiences. And I just kept being directed into the experiences and couldn't understand why people were poo-pooing them when it was the core of my existence. But I realize, and just especially in this moment of conversation, that for me, it's all been coming through the deep I am of knowing itself and deepening the recognition of self. So it's beautiful to hang out in the light in that way. And if it's a practice that you love, you can still do that. And maybe before coming out of your meditation, invite that light to penetrate all the way through the cells and atoms of your body to ground.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to have a lot of heart. It doesn't.
The light doesn't. The light?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it has. It's filled with heart. It seems like when I come out of it, I feel if I go really, really deep, then I feel like I'm not connected as much as to everything around me. Like I don't see nature as beautiful as if I'm just sort of resting more just in the heart.
Well, I could see why that would be confusing.
Yeah.
So,
and I'll tell you why. I mean, this is a pretty wild story, but when I was very young, I had a spiritual teacher. I was 16 years old, and my girlfriend's father was a spiritual teacher. And he initiated me to this thing called light and sound. I don't know if you've ever heard of it before, but it's this teaching that's pretty popular in India. And it's a connection to this light. If you get initiated, you get this light and this sound. And ever since I studied with him, I've had this, when I first started studying with him, I had this incredible I thought I was playing football, and I thought maybe I had a concussion because I was just flooded with so much light all the time, you know. And it always stayed with me, that light, and also the sound. Like when I'm around, like here, that sound's been super loud, you know, because you know, if the energy's really, you know, pure or fine, I can hear it louder and louder. It's almost like right now I can hear it. So it's kind of a strange thing, don't you think?
Well,
It's always been with me. And if I'm in the dark, I've never talked about this before, by the way. You know, I've always kept it a secret, sort of, you know. And but even if I'm walking in the dark, all of a sudden I'm flooded with light all the time. So it's kind of an odd thing. And actually, I have talked about it maybe over the last 20 years, ever so often. And people just give me this kind of go, I don't know what the hell to say, you know.
well, the same way I was speaking earlier about how when you rest in one perceptual field, then you can experience the light or God or your higher self as something that's separate. So what I'm wanting to support is us knowing, each of us knowing this truth from the inside. So connecting yourself in through where you are that. And assuming that this light and sound are true, then you will find that that is what you are when you open in through those layers. And knowing it from that grounded place on the inside, then it doesn't make you feel disconnected with what's around.
That makes sense.
Great. So I would love to invite you through somewhat of a guided experience that's the doorway for your own direct experience. And so if it starts to deviate from what my words are saying, to not worry about that. And to stay with the intrinsic wisdom unfolding within you. And I'd like to approach this somewhat as a story, with the same feel that we had this morning of being a child, having a story read to you, enveloped in love, and listening so intently that the story becomes alive within you, and then all layers are present, all nestled in. And so take a moment, resting as the universe, and resting as the constellation of planetary and star alignment that was perfect for this incarnation. And resting as this mindless expanse, or pure mind without thought. Resting in the perfection and harmony of this moment. Rest as this perfect constellation of you. And see the core flow arising out of you as this universe, arising out of you down into a soul, arising as the soul with a template for this particular lifetime. And on the soul level, there's light and desire, enthusiasm for the adventure. And so let's rest here with these two octaves for the moment. Yourself as the universe with a perfect planetary alignment. And a pathway to the soul aspect that will incarnate with all the enthusiasm and joy and possibility for the coming adventure. And as you rest as the soul, there's a knowing that there may be ups and downs and challenges and hardships and confusions and wandering and feeling lost and feeling spot on. With a sense of wonder, and a knowing you will experience hurt. And take a moment to bring your awareness to that aperture of the universe and the constellation, where intrinsic wisdom is your nature. And a knowing that you are beyond any of those experiences, where it is impossible to damage or mar your divine perfection. And so take a little bit of exploratory time here to move attention and felt awareness back and forth between this perfect wisdom where hurt is not possible, into the budding soul aspect that is willing and enthralled with the idea of incarnating, knowing the potential trials and tribulations and wonders and joy. Allow yourself to go back and forth between these two. And perhaps sustain them simultaneously. And notice the different quality of each. And the harmony with each. And the fluidity between the two. And then when you're ready, from the soul aspect perspective, you can look down and see the pathway through to a human being. So to continue to rest in the soul perspective, so you're seeing your humanness, you're seeing that pathway in front of you, but still resting with all the enthusiasm and light around this glorious adventure. And then gently open through the higher octave of that universe, constellation, infinite wisdom. And see through from the infinite wisdom through the soul aspect. And see through down to your this particular lifetime. And gently, little by little, allow yourself to feel more of your presence here while opening up through the soul perspective and this wisdom perspective. Just allowing yourself to see and start to feel more of that fluidity. And then as you begin to play with the fluidity between those layers, I'd like to have you if you're not already, open to the radiance of light and love that is present in each of these octaves. And so maybe you open up in that wisdom, universe, constellation, and open to the purity of the love and the light. At that frequency. So it may happen however it wants to in your own experience, but if guidance is desired, the invitation was to open through that octave of the being the universe and the constellation of your uniqueness, opening through that frequency of being and open to the light and the love of that level of refinement. And to feel the purity and then opening on that soul aspect and feeling the frequencies of love and light and how they feel in through that realm of your being. And so allowing the attention to go to that aspect of enthusiasm about incarnating. And feel how that refinement of light and love from that universe aspect feels in through the soul. Noticing perhaps the refinement and that purity on that universal aspect, and how on the soul level it becomes a little more specific, a little more differentiated. And some of you may be feeling the fabric of your soul and multiple lifetimes within there, all the rich tapestry of color and experience. Just allowing awareness and that your felt sense to explore and feel that soul fabric of yourself. And let yourself really feel the depth of the love for the story. And then see if you can open through this fluidity of light and love in through that universe, constellation, inception of your moment of incarnating, opening through the love and the light through the soul and through your arrival here. Allowing yourself to be in these octaves of, these cascading octaves of love and light. And wisdom. And if you have not already, you can open to that full sense of beingness. In through each of these octaves. opening through the beingness of the universe, the beingness of your soul, and the beingness of your human body. A full being moment. And if it's too much at once, allow yourself to focus on one. Either your beingness here or the beingness on the soul level. And when you feel you're residing and embodied in that, then open to one of the others. So let's do it together. Let's start with the soul level. Resting is that light and love and an enthusiasm for being. And taking a moment to open where you came from, opening to a higher frequency of light and purity and love. And then again, bringing attention to the soul level, light body, being, and love. And then gently, with these two aspects in harmony, resting in the beingness of both. Allow yourself to see this lifetime the beingness of this now moment. And invite yourself to open through each of these layers. Each one having its own kaleidoscope of colors and sensation and richness. And yet there is a steady center. And when you're ready, allow yourself to open to more love and light. Through the embodiment of each of these aspects of your being. And allow yourself to open through that fluidity. Allowing the passageway to be central. So if it has been out in front of you that you've been feeling yourself through your inner vision, allow that pathway to become central and feel the fluidity through your core flow. Through these different octaves of your being. allowing yourself to notice the different frequencies of being from the inside as you move through these different aspects of yourself. Or maybe you're resting as the harmony of all of them. And if so, rest in that harmony while recognizing the distinctions of the parts that make the harmony. And as we continue in harmonizing ourselves with our higher aspects, tuning ourselves, it can start to become clear where there are aspects that are not in tune with our deeper sound light signature. And so I invite you to rest in this amplification of your sound light signature. Allowing the different realms to all be present together simultaneously. Where the light of you meets the enthusiasm of the soul. Enthusiasm and joy of the soul, and begins illuminating your personal field, your field of personality. Recognizing yourself at the core. allowing the system to reorganize. Allowing the inner light to change how you see. And again, inviting the love light signature of being ground more, allowing that love light to penetrate your substance more. And continually opening to the light-filled beingness that increases as you keep surrendering in the deepening alignment and embodiment of the purity of your blueprint, of your love light sound signature. And resting with all these layers all simultaneously. Allow yourself a cleanse in relation to water. Whether you meet the oneness of water and the purity, or take a cosmic cleansing dip. Or open to the purity of water through your body. Open to the cleansing flow of water for a moment in all its octaves. Asking for the purification. And either all at once or one at a time, you can open to the elements with an invitation, a request, a prayer for the harmonizing of the elements in through each of your dimensional bodies. And invite any residue from your clearing process, inviting it into resolution, whether that's through light or through dissolving back to source. or simply inviting disappearance as you rewrite this living moment. Where you recognize each moment is new. And as you fully let go of the past, it doesn't keep writing itself into the future. And so resting here in these octaves of light and love and wisdom, you rest in this miracle of being that rewrites itself. I want to encourage you in this moment. There's an opportunity here to let go of more than you have let go of. The certain aspects of no, the mind has already let go. It's more the residue familiar thought that holds. It's the changes so much you don't even look for the old pattern anymore to see if it's still there. You let go so fully that you're in the bright sunshine. And you see from that new perspective. We can hold on to the story even in the moments of letting go because of the engagement in the game from which that storyline was created. If I just finish this, if I just get this, if I just, that movement of continuing in a certain storyline. And you don't actually lose the treasure when you let the storyline go. The treasure just becomes intrinsic to your being. So this is helpful. The place, the holding that I was seeing happening, started to let go with that direction. So if anyone is concerned that they didn't get it right or are still trying or thinking they missed something, you didn't. There's you didn't miss anything. There's a harmony. I can feel a little bit of thought of doubt of someone who thought I was speaking to them when I wasn't. I was speaking to someone else. And so, other than that thought of wondering, there's a evenness throughout the group, and all that was desired to be accomplished today has been initiated. Initiated towards its completion. Meaning sometimes these shifts take time, but that all that was needed for the shift to reach completion has occurred. So even if the completion hasn't occurred in this moment, it will. And so I'm feeling a completeness in our time in this exercise, and would encourage each of you to trust the process and enjoy the unfolding. And delight in the knowing as it arises and unfolds. While, of course, living the mystery of the unknown unfolding. And the joy of the game you have set out for yourself of self-recovery, self-recognition, self-realization. And I can see the light having made it through the spaces in between in your body. I can see the light making its way all the way through your body to the ground and shining in the spaces in between. And I'm just remembering the title of this retreat, of illuminated being, living light. And seeing this with each of you as this light is grounding and making its way through the body. So we can sit for a few minutes and then we'll end for dinner.